Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness has completed its sophomore frame, its second weekend in theaters, and Forbes and Deadline magazines are both lamenting the performance after a raucous opening weekend. This has one of the most severe drops of any Marvel film to date, and in fact, it is legging out certainly on the lowest end of Marvel productions to this point. We're going to talk about that and a few other things and my projections on where this movie might wind up. I hate to say I told you so. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back, folks. Another great day here at Valiant Renegades. Good to see everybody out there again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video right now that are not yet subscribed to this channel, please do take a moment, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and do, of course, leave a comment before you head out the door today. Let's talk a little bit more about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because this, as happy as I think the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios was after the opening weekend, is probably about as upset they are now after the second weekend. This thing did not hold on very well at all. There were some warning signs during the week, some of which I alluded to on Twitter. I'm going to talk to you about that kind of stuff. We saw some warning signs Monday and Tuesday that this might be coming. And as the week went on, I started internally lowering my projections as far as how this might wind up. It actually fared a little bit worse than I had anticipated, although not quite as bad as some others might have. But Deadline magazine here, you can see from one of our most often cited authors and journalists over there, Anthony D'Alessandro, a wizard wobble, a wake-up call for Marvel as Doctor Strange 2 falls 67% in weekend 2. So let's get to some of the nitty-gritty on this article. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness had a great fall in its second weekend, down 67% for a Disney-reported 61 million take. Rivals are seeing 60 to 68%. We're going to get to those exact figures in just a moment. It was certainly closer to 60 million. While that drop is akin to the second weekend declines of recent MCU titles, the uber-successful Spider-Man No Way Home, 67.5%, and Black Widow, 67.8%. Know that all of these percentile plummets are not equal. Doctor Strange ranks among the MCU's biggest second weekend box office drops, which includes Black Widow, No Way Home, and 2003's Hulk, down 70% in its second weekend. The latter was executively produced by Kevin Feige, though not part of Disney's Marvel. Yes, and let's talk about some of these differences. We talked about this in the last video, why Spider-Man No Way Home is a good comparison to certain extents and to certain comparative metrics. It is, however, a very poor representation of second weekend drop compared to Doctor Strange. Let's review why. As I said in the previous video, Spider-Man No Way Home was released on December 17th, Friday, December 17th. The second Friday in Spider-Man's frame was Christmas Eve, historically a terrible day for box office because parents and kids are out doing other activities that day. Now, Christmas Day is a bit of a different story. The fact that Spider-Man No Way Home actually still pulled $19 million on its second Friday of Christmas Eve was in and of itself pretty darn good. That also does not take into account the fact that the entire first week of run for Spider-Man No Way Home, not to mention its second week, but for this case, its first week, Monday through Thursday before it hit the second weekend, was a huge holiday week. Schools were completely out of session in North American markets as well as most other places around the world, meaning that the box office was far more loaded up during the weekdays than the weekend. So you would expect to see a little bit more precipitous drop for a movie like that comes out with its second weekend being Christmas. Doctor Strange 2 did not enjoy that same advantage. It did not have a holiday week entirely before its second weekend, meaning that you would expect more of the audiences to be weekend box office loaded. In other words, as I said in the last video, I thought a healthy drop for Doctor Strange 2 and in the second weekend would be somewhere in the 50 to 60% range. Well, we went north of 60, and we went north of 60 by quite a good bit, and it almost broke a 70% drop. That should not happen for a movie that does not have a holiday week leading into its second weekend. The article continues, Doctor Strange's second weekend decline simply rests on bad word of mouth. What did I tell you last week? I said I could see the reports coming out. I could see a lot of the reviews were mixed. It did not have near the same universal appeal and love that Spider-Man No Way Home had. And that was probably going to portend a heavier than normal second weekend drop, although obviously Disney and Marvel Studios were hoping for that to go against the trend. And there was something that I picked up on the Monday and Tuesday numbers that really called it home. Let's take a look at that. Last week on May 11th, we got the Tuesday figures for Doctor Strange's box office. Now, I want to remind everybody that Tuesdays are typically listed as discount days for most major theater chains, meaning they try to get more audiences into the screens on a relatively quiet weekday by offering steeper discounts on ticket prices on Tuesdays. Usually you see a movie bump up on a Tuesday from a Monday figure. With the exception, of course, if the Monday was a holiday. So case in point, we had Shang-Chi, which had its first Monday land on Labor Day, so that had a larger than average Monday. We had things like Black Panther, whose Monday was, I believe, a holiday as well, a federal holiday. So those you have to take out of consideration. There was no such federal holiday here for Doctor Strange. But look at the chart. Here were the Tuesday hauls. Doctor Strange, of course, still came in at the number one position with a 12.6 million haul. But look at the number next to it, that percent YD. That is percent compared to yesterday, meaning Doctor Strange's sales on Tuesday dropped 7% from Monday. And to prove my point about discount Tuesdays, look at every other film. The Bad Guys, plus 38% over Monday. Everything Everywhere All at Once, plus 17% over Monday. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, plus 23%. Fantastic Beasts, plus 23%. The Northman, plus 16%. And on and on and on. Look at all the blues. Everything was up pretty much across the board, almost double digits than it was its Monday figures, with the notable exception of the lead film, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, with a 7% decline. That is notable. That is very notable. And that was a warning sign for me last week, and why I posted this on Twitter. By the way, if you're not following on Twitter, make sure you're following on Twitter. Also follow that Park Place on Twitter as well. Have a lot of good updates. WDW Pro and I like to coordinate a few things as far as stories and articles, and we chat back and forth quite a bit on Twitter. So make sure that you're following both of those pages. But this is striking to me, and this is something that really heralded the second weekend was going to be bad, and here we are. Now, I want to put this in further comparative relevance before we jump over to this Forbes article here. And we're going to talk about this. This is from Scott Mendelson. And again, there's probably a lot of things that I would disagree with many times of what Scott Mendelson has to say, particularly from the commentary or opinion editorial side of things. But when it comes to his numbers, Scott usually gets some good information in terms of production budgets, marketing costs, things like this. So I do respect the man from the material, the actual factual material that he's able to provide the readership. But let's talk about the leg out. And this is where the big difference is. This is where the real big difference is. Even with a 67% drop in its second weekend, like I said, Spider-Man enjoyed a much more robust holiday week where audiences were not as driven to load the box on the second weekend, particularly with Christmas Eve on Friday and Christmas Day on Saturday. But at this point, at the end of its second weekend, Spider-Man had legged out to roughly 1.8 times its opening weekend, meaning its opening weekend was about $260 million, and by the time its second weekend closed, it had amassed a total of about $471 million. So it had really met its mark from that whole week and that weekend. Shang-Chi, another fairly recent example we can use to compare to Doctor Strange. By the end of its second weekend, even though it didn't have nearly as big an opening as Doctor Strange or Spider-Man, it had legged out to 1.9 plus by the end of its second weekend. By the end of Doctor Strange 2 and the Multiverse of Madness' second weekend, it has only legged out to about 1.55. That is a radical underperformance compared to opening weekend. And if you remember the previous video, we talked about how legs work, how well movies sustain over time compared to their opening weekend. The lower that they leg out tends to suggest that the audience response was less warm to the movie than some that legged out like Spider-Man No Way Home at the end of its run to 3.09. or Shang-Chi that legged out even higher than that because it had a whole month to itself in the theaters. Now, Disney is going to make money on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Disney really didn't make any money on Shang-Chi. They probably lost a few $10 or $20 million on that film, as we had talked about in previous videos, based on the raw math and numbers. So yes, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness can be considered a box office success, certainly from the standpoint of, did it make its break-even point and get into profit territory? I think by the end of its run, it certainly will. It's almost at that point now, and I think it definitely should be by this time next week. But the hold for the audience seems to have dropped, and this is why that magazines like Deadline and Anthony D'Alessandro are suggesting this is a warning sign for Marvel Studios, simply for the fact that audiences' reaction to this, as much front-loaded box office as they had, tapered off very quickly. And that could portend some bad news down the road for the next entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thor: Love and Thunder, which comes out later this summer. So let's go to this article from Forbes magazine and Scott Mendelson. Box office: Doctor Strange 2 joins the $100 million losers club, but nears $700 million worldwide. From the article, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness dropped a harsh 67.3% in its second weekend, topping the domestic box office with $61 million for a new $291.9 million 10-day cumulative haul. The raw grosses are still big, but the drop isn't exactly a ringing endorsement despite a total near lack of competition. There was next to no newbie competition at all. With all due respect to Firestarter, the film still took the third biggest drop ever for an MCU flick. Morbius, no, is not MCU. Of course, it's Sony. But behind Black Widow and Spider-Man, again, Spider-Man we got to throw out. Spider-Man does not count in this lineup just because it was a full holiday week release. So even though, yes, it technically did have a 67% drop-off in the second weekend, it's not a fair comparison considering the 4 days that preceded that, Monday through Thursday. Now, I want you to look here because we talked about in the last video that initial projections based on its opening weekend should have put, with a relatively reasonable 2.8 to 2.9 leg out from opening weekend, should put the final haul of Doctor Strange somewhere in the 1.2 billion global total box office haul. That now looks to be almost completely off the table, as it seems that this movie is going to struggle much harder to reach that $1 billion mark. Let's look at Scott Mendelson's projections for this. Again, the Sam Raimi directed and Michael Waldron penned MCU sequel has still earned $292 million domestic and $688 million worldwide in 1.5 weeks of global theatrical play. It still has got 2 weeks before Top Gun Maverick flies into theaters. That's on May 27th. So it has this weekend coming up, and then next week, and then that's going to be it for it. I can't imagine Downton Abbey: A New Era, even if it opens on par with the Addams Family's 18 million launch, is going to do much damage to Strange 2. It likely will not. If it plays like Captain America: Civil War, Eternal, Spider-Man 3, Black Widow, Wolverine, and somewhat other front-loaded superhero flicks, it gets to just under 400 million domestic. However, if it plays like Batman: Superman, it'll earn just 1.269 or 1.31x its 10-day total. It'll end with between 370 and 384. I am more in line with that second figure. I think this is going to struggle to reach 400 million domestically. I think my numbers were about 380 million domestic at this point. I tend to agree here with what Scott has going on. Globally, if it continues to pull a 42-58 domestic split, well, you can do the math. We're looking at a global finish between 872 and 955. Again, there we go, and that's it. And this is why I say this movie is going to struggle now to reach $1 billion. And that is a goal that the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios, I promise you, had in mind. And right now, that has been called into serious question. That is in serious jeopardy. I think if this movie fails to breach the $1 billion mark, that is regardless of whether the movie made money at the box office or not, and it definitely will have made money, certainly by that point, but it's still going to be considered a black eye in terms of PR for this film, especially right on the heels of Spider-Man No Way Home, which nearly cracked $2 billion, that also starred Benedict Cumberbatch in there as Doctor Strange. That would be pretty harsh. And let's not also forget, at this point, from the data that we have available to us, the ticket pricing for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is about 5% higher, 3 to 5% higher than what Spider-Man No Way Home has. We get that data from Entelligence that published this on Deadline. They estimated about 20.5 million tickets sold on Spider-Man No Way Home's opening weekend. They estimate about 13.5 million for Doctor Strange. We can do the math. We can come up with the numbers here, and we can see about a 3 to 5% variance in ticket prices. Again, because AMC did not introduce their big variable pricing schedule until The Batman came out, which was after Spider-Man No Way Home. So again, all this just goes to show there's some struggles going on right now with this. We're going to keep an eye on it and see where this winds up. I find it all very interesting. We have some other data and news to cover in another video regarding some recent polling on Disney. Not very favorable at all, and that stems off of a video that we did about a month ago, which is now approaching almost 50,000 views. I cannot believe it. The biggest video that this channel has had to date, talking about Disney polling data. Go back and check that one out if you haven't seen it, because we have another one to cover in the next video. So it's good to see everybody out there again. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Good to see everybody, and until next time, take care.